I've ranked the best seasons among chapters, the worst seasons among chapters. I've ranked overrated seasons, underrated seasons, but today I'm doing something a little bit different. I'm going to rank every season in Chapter 2 to see which one is the best. I'm starting with Chapter 2 because it's more or less in the game right now with Remix, so it's a little bit more relevant. But I'll probably end up doing every chapter and then eventually making a which chapter is the best video where my scores for this video and all the other videos will come into play. So I'm going to be talking about every season and ranking them on a scale of 1 to 10, but for this video it'll just be Chapter 2. Also, I'm just going to go in chronological order for the seasons just to make things easier. But before we get into it, just want to say be sure to like, subscribe, use code BRIVEN in the item shop. Just be sure to turn the bell icon on so that you're notified when I'm live. We hit 6K a little bit ago. Thank you guys so much for that. Just join the Discord. Link will be in the top of the description. And anyways, love you. Enjoy the video. Chapter 2, Season 1. The infamously long season. 128 days this season lasted. And with like 0 updates. They added stuff for Winterfest, but that was about it. Now, Chapter 2 did introduce a lot of mechanics like fishing, swimming, boating, and obviously a whole new map, but 128 days? That's kinda insane. I remember a lot of Fortnite YouTubers were doing fashion shows this season because of all the lack of updates. And kudos to them, that's a great idea, and it made for some cool content. But back to the season. So the Chapter 2 map was introduced, and I love it. I think this is the best base map out of all the other Fortnite maps. And actually the changes for the first half of the chapter were pretty good, and we will not talk about the second half. The Battle Pass was actually pretty good, and I really like the Tier 100 skin. I don't have much else to say about it. So, interestingly, Chapter 2 didn't have its own weapon meta. It reused Chapter 1's weapons, which I'm actually a fan of, but I think it may have hurt this season a little. With the season being as long as it was, I think having a whole new weapon meta would have made the game a little bit fresher. It still wouldn't have fixed the longevity issue, but I think it would have helped it a little bit. Overall, I think that the lack of updates makes this season have a pretty low ranking to me. It wasn't a bad season by any means, it was just really stale and boring. For Chapter 2 Season 1, I'm feeling a 5.9. And then we got Chapter 2 Season 2. This is a masterpiece of a season. One of the best battle passes of all time, super iconic characters, by far the most drastic gameplay shift the game had ever seen up until this point, and it all worked so well. The mythics, the POIs, the henchmen, the bosses, the changing boosts, the porta potties that would take you somewhere else. There was so much detail this season. I mean, when Deadpool came into the game, Epic vandalized the yacht to make it Deadpool's spot, because Deadpool would do that. Meowscles was banished to the box factory where he'd do the crying emote while walking around, and he even still dropped the yacht key card, and it worked. There was just so much attention to detail that it made the game so cool and fun to play. Now, with that being said, this season, just like its previous season, was too long. This season lasted 117 days, just 11 days less than Season 1. Now, there was so much more content and new stuff this season, which is why it's still regarded as one of the best seasons of all time, despite its long length. Toward the end, though, the game got extremely stale, and it was time to move on after a while. Even a great season like this can only be fun for so long, which is why I think the season should have ended sooner. Nothing crazy, just like a couple weeks earlier would have been fine. Other than that one issue, there was really nothing else too major wrong with this season. Sure, aim assist was extremely annoying this season because they buffed it, and there were mythic weapons, very fast shooting. But that was only really a major issue in competitive, so I'm not gonna deduct too many points for that. Overall, I'm feeling a 9.3 for Season 2. And then we got Chapter 2 Season 3. This is a very interesting season. I feel like not a lot of people give this season its flowers, because this was a really good season. People always talk about Chapter 2 Season 2 and Nexus War, but they never talk about this season. And I can kind of see why, because it's not as earth-shattering and new as the other 2 seasons, but it still introduced some really cool stuff. Sharks, the shockwave launcher, the glider grappler, the whirlpools, the Fortilla, fire mechanics, and a flooded map. So, I mean, it's not like this season was completely void of cool and new things. It just wasn't as overly abundant as Seasons 2 and 4. The Battle Pass was pretty cool too. It matched the vibe of the season very well. Very vibrant, fun skins. While this was a very fun and interesting season, there were also some issues. The main issue for me was the introduction of the charged shotgun. At the time, I could not for the life of me figure out how to use this thing. so I despised it. But Epic nerfed the tac shotgun pretty much to the ground in Season 3, which was the only other shotgun, so you were basically forced to use the charge. This was not a good shotgun meta, and it made the gameplay significantly worse than Season 2. So that was the main problem for me. The only other issue I can think of was the map. I know comp players didn't like the overabundance of water everywhere, because it just made it annoying trying to get around everywhere. But I personally didn't mind. I thought that was cool. So I mean, I'm not gonna take too many points off for that. Overall, this is a very fun season for me, so I'm gonna give it an 8.2. Then we got Chapter 2 Season 4. This is another fantastic season. Epic was on one for the first half of Chapter 2. This is another season where there were just so many changes and new things added to the game. This was also the first season themed around Marvel, or really themed around anything outside of Fortnite. And they cooked with it. The Battle Pass was really good this season, one of the best of Chapter 2. The map changes were super cool with Stark Industries and Doom's Domain. Also, the little Quinjets would fly in every game to different spots. The mythics were very cool this season. Some of them were actually really broken. Unibeam. And the weapon meta was absolutely fantastic. Honestly, probably the best weapon meta of all time. This was a super cool and interesting season with plenty of new things to explore, but like most seasons, there were some issues. I like the season being themed around Marvel, but that's because I enjoy Marvel. If you happen to not be a fan of Marvel, the season might have taken a hit for you personally. But to be honest, I still feel like the game stood well on its own without being just strictly Marvel this season. It still felt like classic Fortnite, it just had a lot of Marvel stuff in it. Not to mention, competitive was insanely fun to watch and play this season. Please, if you haven't, go watch some competitive highlights this season. It was really cool. Everything about this season was cool and fun to me. Even the Galactus event at the end of the season was fantastic. This was and is a fantastic season, so I'm going to give it a 9.2. It's just a little bit less good than Season 2 to me. And that brings us to Chapter 2 Season 5. Now, this is where Chapter 2 takes a wrong turn. This is a season that I do not think too highly of. I don't think it's bad, it wasn't very interesting or fun to me. I didn't love the desert biome, I didn't like the shotgun meta, the battle pass is just okay. This season was just very mid to me. Now, I am a bit biased because I'm not really a Star Wars fan, so I didn't really care for the Mandalorian or the Sniper. I didn't really care for any of the collabs they had this season, which I guess is kind of my problem, but that's also just the risk you run when you use collabs in your game. Now, there was some really cool stuff out of the season, like NPCs you could talk to, exotic weapons, a gold system, and bounties, most of which are still in the game today. To be honest though, I don't think those additions hold as much significance as those from Season 2 or 4. The additions this season were a lot more practical, but they weren't quite as fun. I did enjoy Colossal Coliseum and the Super Bowl Team Rumble LTM, but other than that, this season is pretty forgettable to me. I'm feeling a 6.4 for this season. Chapter 2 Season 6, and this is where things get substantially worse. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. This was a bad season. At the time, it was easily the worst season in Fortnite without a shadow of a doubt, and it's still pretty bad even after all these years. The map changes were not good, even though there actually was a good bit of changes, unlike Season 5. The Spire was cool, but it was just such a yikes to land at, and Colossal Crops was just not good to me. Bony Burrs was actually pretty cool, but it took me a while to realize that, so I didn't like it at the time. The orange biome just didn't do it for me, and the same can be said about the map as a whole. I did enjoy the little mini Spire towers around the map though. Those were cool. That's not the main issue though. The weapon meta was the main issue. Makeshift weapons might just be the worst idea Epic has ever had. So the crafting system kind of caused this dissension among the weapon meta because you had to manually craft what weapon you wanted. The idea was you start off with a bad weapon, makeshift weapon, but you can craft it into what you want. There's a couple problems with this, however. Number one, there were only two types of weapons to choose from, either primal or mechanical, so there was really no reason for makeshift weapons to be in the game in the first place. Why not just put primal and mechanical weapons into the loot pool in its entirety instead of throwing makeshift weapons into the mix? Now, I say all this because makeshift weapons were so unbelievably bad, and that's all you could get in the early game, pretty much. Now, the crafting system for the bows was actually cool because it made sense. You had to kill frogs and collect a stink sack to make a stink bow. You had to get fireflies to make a flame bow, etc, etc. That was cool, even though I didn't really like the bows. The bows were fun to use if you were good with them, which I wasn't, but I mean, that's just a skill issue. The shockwave bow in particular was really cool because of its functionality as a weapon and a movement item as well. But the execution on the crafting system was still terrible Don't get it twisted. The primal weapons were just plain inferior to the regular weapons to me. I mean, they were still good. I would rather carry a pump than a primal shotgun. Same with all the other weapons. So most of the time you were just looking for cars to farm mechanical parts from. That was also really whack. It was just not a good season. It was so annoying to play. The bows, the makeshift weapons, the animals, the sweats, it was not fun. I'm feeling a 4.6 for this season. Then we got Chapter 2, Season 7. Now this is where things take a turn for the better, because I love this season. This season to me is on the same level of fun and interesting as Seasons 2 and 4. There were just a lot of annoying and arguably bad additions that bring it down a bit. Personally, I still like this season better than Seasons 2 and 4, but I know that's not the case for most people. There was so much added this season, and most of it was really good, but there were a couple of bad things. First of all, the map changes were a flop for the most part. I'm not going to sit here and lie about it. All they really did was make the middle of the map into a purple Kool-Aid lake, but they did make Sweaty Sands into Believer Beach. All they really did was graffiti it, but that was cool, and it was fun to look at. And also the little alien bases around the map were cool too. Other than that, there really isn't much to say about the map. Until the Mothership update came into the game. This was essentially a mini game that took place inside the mothership, which would be at different POIs every game. That's how you keep the game fresh right there. Now, depending on performance in this mini game, you'd earn better loot and have an advantage in the early game. Which brings me to loot pool. This is how you do a loot pool. Like, they added so many themed weapons for the season, they went ham. But they kept the pump, tac, AR, all the classic weapons in the game. I think it's important when adding drastically different weapons or items into the game that you have something familiar to lean back on. And this is the perfect example of that. They added a lot of new stuff, but they had OG weapons for players to use. Railgun, recon scanner, inflatable, UFOs, the ray gun, nanite cubes, parasites, just so many new things. And some of them are really annoying, but they were just so different from anything we'd ever seen. And not to mention the theme. The alien theme it works so well. I wasn't expecting it to, but it really works well with Fortnite. Not to mention this was a summer season, so the vibes were immaculate, as always. I also played a lot this season, so I really liked it. And the Battle Pass was also really good to me. Overall, I'm going to give this season an 8.7. And last but not least, we've got Chapter 2 Season 8. I've kind of battled with what I think about this season for a long time now. It definitely wasn't bad, but I wouldn't really consider it great either. It was definitely cool. Not as cool as other seasons of this chapter, but I definitely enjoyed it. The main problem I had with this season was the theme. It felt very recycled and half-baked to me. It just felt very cheap. It was the Dollar Tree version of Chapter 1 Season 6. They didn't really add all that much this season besides the little orange bubbles with all the monsters inside. The map was orange and it was corrupted by the cube, which wasn't too interesting of a map change to me. Oh, they did have the little voting boards, which you could use gold to bring stuff back in the game. That was a really cool concept. Other than that, I don't have too much else to say about this season. I think the skill gap was really highlighted this season. You kind of realized how sweaty everyone was because there wasn't that much in the game to combat anything. I was just really ready for Chapter 2 to be over at this point, so this season was very average to me. I can see why people like this season, and I can also see why some people dislike this season. So with that being said, I'm feeling a very nice flat 7 for this season. And to probably nobody's surprise, Season 2 is the best season of Chapter 2 with a score of 9.3, and Season 6 is the worst of Chapter 2 with a score of 4.7. Overall, Chapter 2 has an average score of 7.4, which I feel is about right. Lots of good seasons, but a few bad ones that tank the score a bit. Still a great chapter though. But anyways, that's going to do it for this video. Let me know what you guys think. I actually really like this video concept, so drop a like on this video if you like this concept, and I'll continue to do this. So anyways, just thank you guys so much for all the support. Just be sure to subscribe if you like these kind of videos. Turn on the bell icon so they're notified when I'm live. Join the Discord, link is in the top of the description. And of course, use code Riven in the item shop when you're purchasing anything. Anyways, I love you. I'll see you in the next one.